Thank you for joining me. My name is Sean Lindemood, and I am going to be doing part 1 of my 2012 Dredd build on this FabricaShawn Friday. So I've decided to start the Judge Dredd helmet with a base from something I cast a couple years ago now. This is a US military helmet, and I'm going to start with this and I'm going to modify it. So this is about 230 grams of 65D. I put in a little bit of black tint because I don't like working with the white when I'm sanding and stuff. It's a lot easier to see at least a slight color change. The goal is to get an initial base coat and get that in the rim. So it's starting to kick. So it's getting thicker. At this point, I'm just spinning it around so that it doesn't like slop. 65D doesn't like to stick to itself. So as soon as this is good enough, I am going to start mixing up another batch. I'm not a big fan of 65D. It's semi-rigid, which means it's soft. So in the heat, it actually doesn't do so well. So I added red dye to this one. It's going to have that little bit of black from before. So it's going to turn out like a, hopefully a maroon. But it's contrasting the gray. So this is the third and final layer. I did it with the black. I added black back in. As you can see, the red layer finished as a nice pink. I didn't add as much red as I thought, but I think we're going to be good. Nice contrasting layers, so when I sand, if I sand through it, I'll see it. If this were to be a wearable mask, or rather helmet, I would have made the edges thicker here, right here on the brim, but that actually should be just fine. Even if it was going to be wearable, but we'll let that layer set up, and I'll be able to demold it. I'm going to demold it in probably a half hour. This stuff's getting old. You can see the little bubbles forming. I need to go ahead and use this plastic up. All right, moment of truth. That looks real solid. Yeah, everything here was actually a really good copy of the original helmet, including these paint drizzles. The paint drizzle here, you can see like a small dent in the helmet. Scrape off the paint. So I'm pretty happy with this. This is the 65D casting that I just showed. This was one that I ended up not using because I realized 65D has a hard time gluing to itself after it's fully cured, and I didn't want to have the issues with super glue and layers and stuff like that having a problem. So I went ahead and redid a couple castings in 321 so that I wouldn't have to deal with the 65D. So with the helmet already out, I took and cut the brim off, and right here I'm widening it by 1 inch just to make sure I get the numbers right for what I'm looking at with the Dredd reference. And that needs to be skirted also. So what I did with that is I put some foam on here. This is all going to get some 321 smooth cast onto it. That'll harden up real nice and be a really good reference for making my hard original. So I have the two halves put together with straps. This is 1 inch thick. I'm going to end up curving in the front portion a little bit like this to give a little more of a sloping front curve to it that I want, and that's going to change the gap in here. So the gap will get closer. I used the bandsaw on this. I didn't cut this with the Dremel, so I kind of went all over the place because I was able to run it through the bandsaw like this. So I have these super glued and taped in place for now. They're actually good and dry right now. So now that I have these spaced out and the rough curvature about how I like it, I'm going to back this with foam and then actually fill this in with 321 so I can have the same material going across when I continue the build-up structure of it. So I'm going to go inside and out, covering this foam, encapsulating it essentially. The white stuff right there is the baking soda I use to help kick the super glue that I use. So that's ready to fill in. The shape's pretty close. I'm going to end up shoring it up because it's still really thin and I have to shore it to keep it shaped so when I sand it and stuff it won't go out around. I'm going to be using Polytex Polyfiber 2 to thicken some Smooth Cast 321. And Smooth Cast 321 will take something like 10 minutes to cure to where I can have to leave it. And you know, it's got like a demold time of like 45 minutes, so we'll just have to let it set. I have 55 grams in a cup of A and B, and I'll be mixing it into a smaller amount so that I can thicken it up into my mixing cup. I'm tearing my balance scale. It's a scale or a balance depending on who you're talking to, so that when I mix this mixture I know how much it's going to be from zero. Okay, that's 16 grams. 16 grams of B. We're going to add a thickener to B, and then we're going to mix in the A. Real powdery stuff right here. My mixing spatula is a butter knife where I took the serrations off, and sometimes I flatten the tip depending if I need to get in the corners or not. I'll reuse these cups quite a bit to the point where I'll have layers and layers of different colors in here. Can't save every cup, but I can try. And it's going to be a lot thinner when I add the 16 grams of A to it. I'm going to add in some Polytex Polycolor Black. 3 drops for 30 grams total should be a nice light gray. The texturing on this helmet is going to get sanded off anyway, so this isn't really going to be a big deal. I'm going to come back in here with this. The next batch is going to be thicker than this. So one of the drawbacks of using old material is that it gets air bubbles in it. This is still a little bit on the soft side since it's curing still. So I'm going to take down the bumps here that are raised while it's still kind of soft. I still need to fill this, but it's going to give me quite a leg up on the shaping of it. I like shaping with this. Plastic is nice to sand and a little bit easy to file, but once I'm down to a certain point I'm going to end up using the filler as well as glazing putty, so that'll get quite a long ways. But as you can see, this is the second layer, inside and out. I went ahead and started filling on this stuff right here. This is going to glue the skirting, and ended up deciding on a vertical angle to provide me the shape that I wanted for the helmet. So this stuff down the middle here is going to end up being covered by the badge, ramp thing, whatever that's called, bump there. So I widen this, and it's gonna be a pretty good size. All this stuff back here is gonna get smoothed over quite a bit, and that's looking real sharp for what I was expecting. Thank you for joining me on part 1 of this Dredd helmet build. Hopefully you learned something, maybe a tip or a trick. Check out my other videos. Feel free to subscribe, and we'll see you on the next FabricaShawn Friday.